Welcome everyone to today's video, and today I'll be building a quiz app that I deployed on Verso, as you can see in the URL. So to start the quiz, you have to click on the start button, and here you get the first question. What is JavaScript? First, company, no. Brand, no. Programming language, yeah. So if you click here, you see this little border of having a blue color, and you get 1 out of 5. So if you want to go to the next question, you click next, you go to the next question. Where do you get tutorials from? You choose. If it's the right choice, you get one other point. So without saying, let's quickly go in our build. So here I got my new file, an empty file, empty HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So let me quickly create my HTML, and here I'll give it a title of quiz app, because that we're going to be building. So I'll say quiz app, and here in the body I'll quickly start by giving a div, and here instead of one div I'll create two divs. So I'll put another div down here, and this first div I'll give it a class of welcome. You can give it any class you want. So I'm going to say class welcome, because this div is going to appear when I load my page for the first time. So this second div, I'll give it a class, and I'll say container, because that is going to be the container of my question and answers. So here in that first div, I'll put here a paragraph that will say welcome to the quiz. Welcome to the quiz, right? And I'll put an exclamation mark. So down here, I'll just add a button, and that button is going to have an ID. So this is going to be the start button, and I'll give it an ID, and that is going to be button start, like this. Okay. So next, I'll have my container that I'll also style, and I'll start by putting a section inside. I'll say section, and this section is going to have a class of questions. Section class is going to be questions, because here is where we're going to put our question and the answers. So inside there, I will have, in that container, I have also a paragraph. Oh, wait for it. All right, I'll have a paragraph, and by default that is going to be empty. And down there, I'll add another div like this, and this div is going to contain our answers, and here I'll just give it a class of answers so that I refer to it easily. All right, so down this section I'll have another section, and that section is going to have our button next. All right, next. So here, this section, I'll give it a class, and I'll say class equal to buttons, like that. Then this next button, I'll also give it a class, and I'll say class is going to be button underscore underscore next, like this. So this will be a class going to be equal to this. All right, button next, like that. Okay, so outside that container, or let me say inside that container, but down the buttons, I'll have another paragraph like that, and this paragraph is going to have a class of section, a class of score, because this is going to hold our current score. And inside there, I'll just put a span, and this span by default to have 0 out of I'll say 0 out of 5, but I'm putting this 0 in a span so that I can give it a class, because I'll be referring to it to update it. All right, and here, instead of giving this a class, I'll actually give it an ID, and this ID is going to be the ID of score, right? So if I go back to my browser, I refresh this, okay, this is all we get up until this point. So next step, I'll just import my CSS. So I'll say link, this is going to be link CSS. I import that style CSS, and down here I'll just say script source, and this is going to be index.js, so that I import my JavaScript file. So let's start with our styling real quick. And first thing, I'm going to style my body, the whole body. So this is going to have a background, I'll say background color, and that is going to be, okay, not background color, I'll just say background. This is going to be our linear gradient, and here I'll say to right, and RGB, I'll put my first color, say RGB, and this is going to be not RGB, let me just make it easy and say turquoise. Again, I really don't know how to pronounce that. Is it turquoise, turquoise? I don't know, but I'll continue and say RGB, and now this is going to be for 160 and 144. So down here, I'll continue and say the height. The height should be 90 view height, and down display flex, so that everything that is inside the body gets placed in the middle. Display flex, and I'll align items center and justify content also in the center. So I say by default each element should have a font size of 20 pixels. So if I give that a try, let's actually see what we got here. Okay, this is what we got, but it's still messy. So let's continue the styling so that we get something right there. So I'll style my container that is going to hold our questions, and here I'll give it a height, and that is going to be 60 view height, and I'll give it a width. Oh, this should be width actually, and that is going to be 70 pixels. No, 70 view width, like that. So I'll say background transparent, but you don't even need that. I'll say display grid, that is going to have a display of grid, and down here I'll say grid template columns. These are going to be 100% so that it takes the whole width, and I'll say grid template rows. Here's where I'm going to specify 90% and 10%. If I go down here, I'll again justify content in the center and align items in the center, just like that. So why am I saying grid template rows 90% and 10%? So if you go back to our container, you see that we have actually 3 sections, but I would like that 2 first question sections to take the whole height. So here, this is going to take 90% of the whole height, that section that is going to hold our questions, and the button of next is only going to take 10%. So let's see what is happening here. Okay, that is becoming a bit nice, but you can't really see the changes right now. So let me just continue styling this, and I'll say by default this should have a display of none. So that means I'll first remove this display of grid, because you can't have display twice. So by default this is going to be hidden. So if that is hidden, what do we want to see when we go to when we go to our browser for the first time? For reaching that far, I'll first style my score, that class of score, and I'll say font size. That font size should be 40 pixels, and I'll say down here the width should be 10 view width, and I'll continue by saying that the font weight should be 700 so that it becomes a bit bolder. So I'll say color is going to be white, and down the color I'm going to say top. All right, so I'll first say position. I'll give this a position of absolute, now say top, that should be equal to 0 and left 45%. So no matter what, that div containing this class of score is going to be positioned at top 0. That means going to be up there and at 40% from the left. So down now I'm going to style our first page, the page we should see, the div we should see when we load our page for the first time. And I'm going to give this a height of 20 view height, and I'll give it a width of 30 view width, and also a background, and my background should be a white background. So I continue and I'll say next, border radius is going to be 5 pixels so that it has some round on the corners. So I'll say text align, and this should be in the center. So next I'm going to say text transform, that should be to uppercase so that text becomes an uppercase text. So I refresh. Okay, this is becoming a bit nice, right? So we have to continue some stylings on that specific element. So here we're not seeing the background. That means we have some problem. Here. So if I go back to my HTML, here's the problem. I'd put an equal sign inside there. So I'll go back, I refresh, we got it. All right, that our welcome page. This is the page you're going to see when we reach, for the first time, when you reach this application. So I'm going to continue the styling, and I'll style the paragraph that is inside this welcome div, and that paragraph is going to have a font size, and that font size will be 27 pixels. So next I'm going to style the margin. I'll say margin bottom. This is going to be 8M so that we get some space down between the paragraph and the button. So I'll continue and say text transform, and this is going to be uppercase. All right, text transform is going to be uppercase. Next I'll just say border. Okay, let's first give it a try and see what is happening here. All right, you see it's becoming a bit big. So next I'll style now the button, and I'll say welcome, and then button like this. So the button that is inside that element having that div, I would like to give it a width of 40% of the whole available width of the parent available width, and I'll give that a padding. I should have a padding of 10 pixels, and down here I'll say border none so that to remove the border on that button, and the outline also I'll set it to none, not to white but to none, just like this. And down here I'll just say font size, it should be 18 pixels. So we'll continue and say background. I'll set this to RGB, and that will be 19 right here, 19, 220 and 235, so that it becomes something like a blue color. Okay, let me try that and see what is happening here. So if I refresh that, okay, we got that button, but it's going a bit down, and that's not a problem at this point. So we'll continue the styling. Let me take care of that button. I'll say here on the height, instead of putting 20 view height, I might say this is going to go that to 25, and we give that a try. So I refresh here. All right, that's what we want, right? Okay. Then next, I will continue the stylings, because at this point, even if we start our JavaScript, we won't get anything interesting. So I'll say questions. I'll first style my question is div, and I'll give it a height of 99%. So down here, I'll just say padding. And this is going to have a padding of, should I give it a padding? Oh, actually, let me just continue and leave the padding aside. Say display. This is going to be display grid. Then next step, I'll just say grid template columns. That is going to be 100% again. Then grid template rows. This is going to be 25% and 75%. All right. So I continue and I'll say align items center, align items center, justify content center, and yeah, that's all. But there is, okay, let me first show you what we get at this point. Yeah, but you don't see anything, right? Because you need to click on that start button so that we get another page. So I'll say here flex direction, that is going to be column, because I would like it to be going that side. All right, so let me first finish with the styling. The rest I'll be explaining step by step. So next I'm going to say questions paragraph, where I'm going to be outputting my actual question. So say question P, and it's going to have a background of white smoke, and I'll give it a height of 100%. And down here I'll just see the display flex. I would like to put the actual question in the middle of the whole paragraph. That's the flex. And here align items center, and again align items, you center the element on the vertical side, and here justify content, that will be on the horizontal line. All right, center like this. So with that, I'm done with that part there. So I'll come down here and I say my class of button, and it's this class right here. It shouldn't be buttons, but button like that. And I'll style that, and I'll say the height should be 90%. And down here I'll say padding should have a padding of 8 pixels. And continuing the styling, also on here I'll set the font size 20 pixels. I'll set the font size to 20 pixels like this. Okay, the next step, I'll just say inside here we want to have that display of flex again, align items center, and justify content also center. So I'll remove this padding here. So I'll style the button that is inside there. I mean this button now right here, this next button, that what I'd like to style. So I'll access it via its parent. And then, by the way, you can still access that button via this button next, right? But I don't want that at the moment. So I'll say width that should have a width of 50%, and it should have a padding. Yeah, this is going to add a padding of 8 pixels. Again, font size. This is going to be 20 pixels. So I should remove the border of the button, because by default a button has a border. So I'll remove that. I'll also remove the outline. I'll set it to none, like that. I'll also add some border radius. Border radius. I'll just say 6 pixels. 6 pixels, like that. So my answers that I'm getting from here, this div that will contain all my answers, I mean all the possible answers. So there I'm going to access that class like this, and I'll say display flex. Display flex. Again, I'd like to put everything in the middle. So I'll say align items, center, justify content, center also. Next step, flex direction again. That should be column. Alright. So I'll say gap between the columns and the line and the rows. That gap should be a 10% gap. So down, I'll continue and say background. That background should just be a white background. A white background, like this. Alright. So next, I'll say the height should be 100%, so that it takes a whole available height. And I'll say margin bottom, a margin bottom of 5 pixels. Next, what I'm going to do is to style the answer button. So this class, I'm reserving this class because I will add it to each button, to each answer. I'll add that class to each of the possible answers, and I'm going to show you that in my JavaScript how I'm going to add it. So I'm just preparing the styling in advance. So I'll say width. The width should be 30%. So next, the padding should be 10 pixels. Again, here I'll remove the border. I'll set that to none, and also remove the outline. Also set that to none. Alright, so I'll just say background here. Background there is going to be equal to RGB, and this is going to be 40 and 133. Or actually, no, I would like it to be, it's like some white, So this is going to be 223, then 223 again, and again 223. So that it's like a kind of gray. So I'm going to add another specific class that I will be adding via JavaScript, and I will be adding that to this answer button. Then I would add the class of valid to the button that have the right answer. So here I would like to add the border, and this is going to be at 2 pixels as you saw it in the beginning when I was trying the app. RGB, and I would like it to be somehow blue, so I'll say 40, 133, and 240. Alright, so if I have a class of valid, I should also have that class of invalid. Ctrl V, so here I'll say invalid, so I'll be adding that class to all those invalid answers, right? So here it's going to be tomato. I'll just add tomato there. So at this moment, I think we can start with our JavaScript now, so that we see actually what is happening. So first thing, I'll just say const container, and that is going to be equal this container here. this whole container containing all my questions, and I would like now to change this display none to display grid so that it appears, right? So I'll first call that my document dot query selector, and I'll select it by its class of container like this, the class of container. Next, I'm going to select my welcome box. So that box we see, welcome box, that is this box right here. Let me show it to you. This box right here, I'll also select it so that when I click on that start button, that box disappears. So I'll first call that query selector again, and that box has a class of welcome, right? So I'll call it by that class of welcome. So next step, I'm also going to call the button star, and that is going to be document dot query selector also, and I'll call it by its class. Let me see the class I had prepared there. It's this button start class, right? So I'll say button start. That's the class we're going to use there. So let me just call all the elements I'm going to need. So I'll say const question paragraph, where I'm going to output my question paragraph, that is going to be document dot query selector, and I'll call that paragraph its class of question. It has a class of question. If we go back to our HTML, you see this paragraph. I should add here class of question. Okay, so I want to add that class, and that is going to be question like this. Okay, so next step, I'll also call my answers container. So I'll say answers container, and that is going to be this div right here. Let me show it to you. This div having the class of answers. So I'll say document dot query selector, and I'll call that by its class of answers like that. So next step, I'm going to call the answers, right? I'll say const answers, and these ones are going to be called by document dot query selector, and I'll say query selector all. I have that class of query selector all, and I'll select them all by their class of answer, and answer like this. And I'm sure I'd prepared that answer class. It has to be somewhere here. Okay, we'll do that in a second. So next step, after calling that one, I'll just say, okay, let me try to call my score const. I'll just call my score span, because it's in the span, so that I remember the name easily. Document the query selector. Again, I'll call it by its class of score, like that. Or instead of calling it by its class, I'll just call it by its ID. So that I don't call this whole class of score, but instead I call this 0, so that I update it using JavaScript, right? Whenever I click a right answer, I would like to update that. So next, I'll just call my button next, so that whenever I click on a next button, that directs me to another question. So here I'll say this is going to be equal to const button next, and I'll say document dot query selector, and I'll call that by its class of button underscore next. All right. So down here, what I will do, I'll say I would like whenever I click on this button, this disappear and I get my questions, right? So let me implement that. I'll say container, not container, but this button start dot on click when I no, but I would like to add an event listener to that, and that event listener is going to be the click event. So whenever I click on that button, I do something, right? So let me quickly do that, and I'll say here click, that is the event we get. So I'll execute this function whenever I click on that button start. And what I'm going to do, I'll take my welcome box and I'll set the style and the display to none, but not this. I'll get the style, not get element by class, but I'll say style display. This is going to be equal to none, like this, so that whenever I click on the start button, this welcome box disappears. Then I'll get my container, and I'll also set the style and the display. I would like to set this to grid, right? And why? That's because here we had set it to none, yet it's supposed to be grid. So in this JavaScript, that is where I'm going to set that. So if I come back here, I refresh, and you see I'm on my local machine. So I click here, I click, nothing happens. So when you go to your console, you click here, you see you get an error, cannot read property add event listener of null. That means this button start is not called, and my button start is just right here, and I'm calling that using the button start. So let me check that class if it's the same right here. So actually I had put here an ID, yet this is supposed to be a class. That was the error. If I go back, I refresh, I click here, you see I get this new div. But if you see this, guys, this is not responsive, right? It's a bit ugly. So before going deep, let me first style this, all right? Because if you go here, even on an iPhone X, you see some text over. So let me quickly go back and style that so that it becomes responsive, right? Okay, so I'll come back to my CSS again and now use the media query. And I'll say media query and max width, and this max width should be 1024 pixels. That is like an iPad Pro or something like that. So I'll say when this condition is matched, when this condition right here is matched, what I would like to do is to say this welcome, that class of welcome, I should give it a width of 60%. Width should be 60% or 60 view width. Okay. So let me first give it a try and we see what is happening here. All right, you see on an iPhone X it's becoming a bit nice, right? But I would like to continue the styling because I don't want this to be split into two lines. So let me continue the styling and I'll just copy this. I'll copy this right here so that I save some minutes typing. So I'll say here the next condition, when this is max width 768 pixels, yeah, that is like an iPad now instead of an iPad Pro. So instead of this, I'll now change the answer button. All right, I'll change the answer button, but now you can't see it because you have not yet reached that point, but I would like to style it before, all right, so that when we reach there, it's already responsive. I would like that to be 600%. The next step, I'll say again media query, and I'll say when this is less or equal than 480 pixels. So now those are mobile phones and so on. I'll first style a container, and I'll say the width of that container should be 90 view width. So next step, I'll say the welcome, this should be 90 view width on mobile devices, and the paragraph of that welcome paragraph, I should decrease the font size and say the font size should be 20 pixels like this. So next step, I'll say the score that should decrease on the font size, and I'll give it the font size of 22 pixels and a width of 20 view width. So with that said, this is now responsive. As you can tell, it looks nice, right? So even if you go on an iPad, it looks nice. You come on iPhone 6, it's still nice. So now it's time to focus on the JavaScript part of this. So still, when you click right here, you get this 0 out of 5 and the next button. But what we'd like to do is to output some questions we have prepared, right? And for this, let's create some questions here, not in the CSS but in the JavaScript file. So before all this, I'll say constant questions, and this is going to be equal to an array. So this array is going to contain objects, and each object, so that array should contain object, and each object is a question. So inside each question, we are going to have the actual question, right? Because this question object will have the questions and the answers. So here I'll say, what is JavaScript? Like that. Put a question mark. What is JavaScript? That is my actual question. So beside that, I'll put my answers now. Answers like this. And let me just put this on a new line. Okay, this one also should go on a new line. So these answers should also be an array. So an array containing object again. So don't get confused. And now each object is going to be the answer. So let me see the text of that answer is going to be maybe here. I'll say this is a company. That is my first possible answer. So for each answer, I'll be setting something that I'm going to call maybe is answer. So is answer, and I'll give it a value. So is answer false, all right? Because that is not our answer. So I'll continue, and maybe to save some time, I'll just copy this code, Ctrl+C, and I just put it here. The next, I'm going to say it's a brand. It's a brand like this, brand. So is answer false because JavaScript is not a brand, right? And again here I'll say programming language. Yeah, so programming language. Is JavaScript a programming language? I guess you already know the answer. So here instead of false, I'll say to true. So is answer true? Yeah, it's an answer, and that is going to be like that. And we should only have one answer, one true answer, if I can say like that. So The last option is going to be text. So I'll say none of the above. Okay, so I'll say is answer, and this is going to be false. Is answer, and I'll set this to false because we have a true answer there, right? So now let me just do some other thing. I'll copy this so that I can change it. Okay, let me add a couple of questions here. Okay, now we have 5 questions that are prepared there. So next step, what I'm going to do is to output those questions on the screen, right? I would like to output those questions on the actual screen. So here, what I'll do, I'll first create a function to output one question at a time, right? And that function, I'll just call it right here. And I'll give it a name of one question because I would like to get only one question at a time. And that one question is going to receive some parameters, right? But for now, let me first leave that. Or instead of leaving that like that, I'll first create that parameters. And I'll do it right here. And I'll say let first question be equal to 0. Okay, for now I'll just say the first question should be 0, and this 0 will coming from this array at index 0. So this what is JavaScript is going to be our first question. So this is what you're going to receive here as a parameter. So let me now define that one question, right? Because we can't use it without defining it. So this is going to be equal to that function, and this function, remember, it takes like an index right there. That function takes an index, and that index is going to be used to get a specific question at a specific position. So I'll say here const question like this is going to be equal questions. I get my area of questions, but I would like to access a specific question, and that is going to be my first question. Okay, and now that means it's going to be questions 0, the element that is at position or at index 0, and it's this one, what is JavaScript. But later we'll be getting this first question randomly so that we don't get always the same question as the first question, but instead we get some random first question. So next step, I'll say question. I would like to output this text of the question to that I would like to output it right here to this paragraph where I say class question. Okay, let me do that, and then down here I'll just say paragraph question. I think that's how I called it. No, I called it question paragraph. Question paragraph dot. And then I'm going to access this text content, and that is going to be equal to question, this question. That means this specific question here, but as it's an object, I'll say question dot question. I hope you get what I'm doing here. So I'm accessing this whole question, but I'm interested in the question inside that object. That's why I'm saying question, this whole question, but dot question. So I'm going to get this, what is JavaScript. Okay, so next step, okay, let me first give that a try so that we see the output. So I refresh. So when I click on start, you see what is JavaScript, but we are not getting the answers. Okay, all the options depends on you. Let us create those options down here, and for that I'll say I'll first loop through that array of questions. So I'll say question dot answers dot for each. I'll use the for each method, and for each element, and I mean in this case for each question, I would like to do something. Each question of that array of answers or array of options. First of all, I'll first create a button. That is going to be document dot create element, and here these are all the elements you can create. So in my case, I'll just create a button like that, and next step I'm going to add a class to that button. So I'll say button dot classList dot add, and the class that I'm going to add on that button is going to be the class of button actually, and that class is right here. Let me show you that class. We had styled it right here. This is the class that we would like to add to each element, so to each option, if I can say like that. And next I'm going to append, I'm going to say button dot append, and to each button I would like to append the answer like this. I would like to append the answer dot text, right, like that. So that I append this text, or this text. And here I made a mistake, sorry. I'm not going to add this class of button, but instead I would like to add the answer underscore button. So let's look at that answer button, this one. All right. So let me quickly go back to my JavaScript. So after appending that, if you go back now to the browser, you won't see anything. Now we would like to output that inside that container, right? Inside this container here, this container, this div of answers. So to do that, I'll just come down here and I'll say answer container that I've prepared dot append child, because those buttons are going to be the children of that big element. After appending that button, I'm going to add some data to that button. So I'll say button dot data. There is a property called data set. If you want to append some external or to add some values to an element, you can say data set. And what I'm going to add is correct. Okay. And I'm going to say this to answer dot is answer. Right, and this is our boolean that will be helping us to check if the answer is correct or the answer is not correct. So down here, and I would like to append each button, I would like to append an event listener, add an event listener, so that when you click on the button, we can be able to check if that answer is true or the answer is false, and add a new class, either a border that is red or a border that is blue, to say if this class is this answer is the right one or is the wrong one. So I'll add a new function that I'm going to call check answer. So before we define that check answer, let me first say down here check answer like this. Okay, so before we add logic to that, let's quickly see if what we have done there is working. So if I start, all right, you see what is JavaScript here, but we are not seeing anything appended down here, right? So let's check in our console if we have any error. And yeah, you see this error saying answer is not defined at line 43. So if we come to line 43, they tell us that answer is not defined, right? And that is because this is not answer.text, but this is question.text, right? Oh, let's say answer.text, but here instead of question I'll just say answer like this. So we give that a try. Again, I refresh, and okay, they are appearing right here. These are our options, and as you can see, completely responsive, right? Big screen, responsive. These are our answers. So by the time if you click here, nothing is happening, so you're not choosing any answer. So we'll take care of that in that check answer function that is right here. That is the function we are going to work on next. So here on this function, I'll just define that function, and what I'm going to do here is to first call all those buttons we are getting. I mean all those answers, right? So I'll say const buttons, all buttons, those are equal to our answers. Oh, to avoid confusion, let me say all answers, and this is going to be equal to document dot query selector all, and what I'm going to select is all element having the class of answer. And remember, we appended that class. Where did we append that class? I think it's right here. It's answer button, right? Class of answer button like this. So next step, what I'm going to do is to say const, not here, but on the next line, I'll say const. This is going to be answer boolean. Answer boolean. So this answer boolean, we are going boolean, like this. It's going to be event, because when you click on each button, it's an event. So I'll say event.target dot dataset that is correct. And remember, we had added that here up. After getting that boolean, we are going to first check. We'll say if answer boolean. Actually, if this was still the same boolean, we could say answer boolean to say that if true. But now the funny part, you see right here where we had assigned that data set, this boolean has been converted to a string. So we have to check if that is equal to true like this, because our boolean has been converted to a string. So we say if that is true, our event dot target this, and to that we are going to add our class list dot add, and the class we're going to add is the valid class like this, valid. So we'll say maybe here, let's say if you click on this brand and maybe that is the right answer, what we would like to do, if this is the right answer, we add a class that will output a blue border here. So this is our valid class, okay? And here, instead of adding it using this dot, we remove that like that. And this valid class, we had prepared it right here. So if it's valid, we add this border of a blue border. If it's invalid, we add a tomato. So let's implement that invalid. And here, I'll say if this is valid, we'd like to increment our score. So up here, I'll also define let score equal 0. So that here I'm going to just say if we get the correct answer, I would like for to increment. I would like to increment the score like that. So after that, I'll say score score span, score span dot text content that is going to be equal to the score. So if this boolean is, this answer boolean is not equal to true, that means it's equal to false. We would like to set the invalid class e.target dot class list dot add the invalid, just like this. Okay, so after that, if you come back here, you refresh, they ask you, you start the quiz, they say, what is JavaScript? If I click here, you see it's outputting red. That means this is a wrong answer. But for the moment, you can still choose another one and still red, choose another one, still red. You also choose another one, still red. That means nothing is working, right? But if you see we have some default behavior here. This was supposed to be blue because this is the right answer. Here's where I did some silly mistake. I forgot to put the else, if else block. Alright, there it will work. I refresh. So if you click here, company, no, it's red, no, brand, no. But when you click here, you see it becomes blue, but you can still have to check it many times, you get. But now I would like to do like this. Maybe when you click this brand, you can't have any other choice. And for that, I'll come down here and I'll say all answers. And that is actually, that is an array. And I'll say for each element of that array, I'll do this, I'll get that element and I'll set the element dot disabled. So the element dot disabled to true, disabled to true, so that it becomes disabled. So if I refresh that, you refresh, you start. So if I say what is JavaScript brand, you see they become a bit gray. Let me put it on a big screen so that even if you click here or here, nothing happens, right? So let's check that again. If you say what is JavaScript programming language, you see you click it, it becomes blue, but the answer as it is are disabled now. And there is another behavior, I don't know if you saw that. This is being incremented. So if you click on the right answer, it's being incremented. If you click on the wrong answer, nothing happens. And this is because we are incrementing the score only if we get a true or if we get the right answer, right? So we are getting closer to our app. This is already working. When you click here, that is also working, but when you click next, nothing is coming, right? So we would like to take care of that next, you get, so that we get a brand new question here and brand new options here when you click on the next. So what I'm going to do here for that next button, I'll come down here and add a bit of logic. I'll say button next, going to be button next, add event listener, and the event listener I'm going to add here is the click, because I would like to listen to some event whenever I click on that button. All right, so here what I'm going to do, I'll say the next question should be minus next question. I decrease that next question and I'll come up here. I say my next question is going to be equal my first question like this. By default, my next question is going to be equal to my first question. All right. So here, maybe instead of decreasing that, by default, I'll be incrementing that. So here, remember, my first question is question 0. So my next question, if I increase it, it will be 1. I increase again to be 2, and so on. So that here we get to the next question. But remember, this is the function that is responsible for outputting the next question or the coming question, right? So there is one thing I can do here. So instead of putting first question here, so that I can reuse this, I'll just put the index. So this index that I'm getting from here. So in my case, my index will be the first question. So that was going to be used to get the question from the array. So if I come here, after that, I'll just say, I would like to call that one question function. And so inside here, the index I would like is my next question index. All right. So before I do that, let me log that to the console so that you see how it's being incremented. All right. So if I do this, I refresh, I open my console. So I click on start. So this is what I want to click on, the next button. When I remember, this by default is 0. The first question is 0. So the next question, when you click next, you get 1 here. You click next again, you get 2. Next again, you get 3. All right. So instead of logging that in the console, now I'll say one question. I'll call that function of one question like this. So before going to the next question, what I would like to do is to clear the previous input. You got it? So I'll say question paragraph dot text content. I'll first clear that, becomes empty. Also answers container dot text content, that should also be empty. So after clearing that, I call my next function. So we give that a try. I refresh. I start my quiz. So what is JavaScript? Programming language. I get my 1 point. I click next, we get a new one. What is Python? Also programming language. I get a new point. I click next. What is a snake? That is an object. That is an animal, right? I click. So how much do you spend daily? I don't know. Let me try to lie to you. Say $50. Right answer. I click next, and so on. But here, a default thing you should see, this is my 5th question. But when you click next, this is still going to increase, right? So when it increases, we get an error. Cannot read property questions of undefined at one question. And because at this time, my next question here is going to be index of 5. Yet in my questions array, we don't have index 5. This is index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. The last one is at index 4. So now let me try to implement a logic so that whenever all the 5 questions are done, I'm going to stop there and I say quiz done. But before that, instead of always getting my first question as this 0, I'll try to say math floor of math random, math dot random, and the random gets a number between 0 and 1, and I'll be multiplying that times 5, so that the biggest number we get is 4, because our last index here is 4. Okay, so that way we are going to be getting the first question randomly. So if I select here, before that I'm getting an error saying math is not defined, and this is because this should be capital like that. So I refresh here like this. I start. You see, The first question is, what is JavaScript? If I refresh again and I click here, we get a new question. Where do you get tutorials from? If I refresh and I start the quiz, we get another one. I refresh, we get another one. So that if many users are using the system, they don't get the same question all the time. So after that, let me implement the logic so that whenever I've replied to all the 5 questions, we get something saying quiz done. So here, instead of increasing that, I'll be decreasing it. Okay, so here I'll say if next question, and this is the value here, if that is less than 0. Why am I checking if it's less than 0? Remember, I'm now decreasing. Let's say the first question we had picked was index 2. So if I decrease, we go to index 1. 2 minus 1, 1. So if I decrease again, I'm going to get 0. Then if I execute this line again, now we are getting minus 1. So that's why I would like to check if the next question is less than 0. I don't like to continue removing the value, but I'll say next question is now going to be equal. We are going now to get next question, and that will be equal to questions.length minus next question. Plus next question, because that is going to be a negative value. So here let's say we are at position -1. Remember, -1 is the last item of the array going from right to left. So -1, in our case, -1 is equal to 4, and index 4 is the last item in the array. So when we check here, question.length, remember that is 5, plus next question. Let's suppose next question is -1. That will be 5 minus 1, and it will be 4. And that will be the element that is at position 4, at index 4. So we are kind of doing the same thing. So next step, I'm also going to check if first question like this, first question is equal to next question. That means if for the first question, was the question at index 3, and now while going to the next question, we get this value equal to index 3, that means we have covered all the questions and we don't want to continue, right? So here what I'm going to do, I'll say question paragraph. Question will be question paragraph. I would like to say this text content, now this should be equal to quiz done. All right, like this. So if maybe our first question was the question at index 3, now the next question is going to be the question at index 2, the next index 1, the next question index 0, then the continuing question is going to be index 4, because it's going to be 0. It's going to be 0 minus 1. Now we check here, we reach this if. That means next question is going to be -1, and that is less than 0. So instead of decreasing, next question now is going to be 4. That means question length 5 minus 1. That is going to be 4. And then the next question is going to be 5 minus 2, and that is going to be 3. That means we have reached the question we started with. And in that case, I don't want to continue. All I want is to set quiz to quiz done. That means to stop that quiz. And here I want to hide my button next, because if my quiz is done, I don't want to set next because there is nowhere I'm going. So here, instead of text context, here it's going to be this style dot display, and this is going to be the display of none, like this. And another thing I'll say that my answers container, so I don't want to see that anymore because the quiz is done. So that is going to be equal to an empty string, or instead I'll say I will hide that. Okay, I think that is good for user experience. And this is not disabled, but this is display, and this is also going to be equal to none. So if we give that a try, we see what is happening here. I refresh, so we start the quiz. You see, this is my first question: where do you get tutorials from? Oh, let me say Skillshare, because that the one I chose has the right answer. So I go here, I do something. Okay, let me try to fail that. so that we see the result here. Okay, we continue. So if I hit next, you see now we are getting some behavior we don't want. We are seeing where do you get tutorials from, but the next button is hidden and the answers are hidden. That means we are at the end. But now this is prompting us to the next question. So why is this happening? If you go back to this code, this is being checked, right? Because the display is being set to none, here also to none. But after, remember, the execution code goes from top to bottom. So after checking this, it goes to the next line, right? And it executes this function here. That's why we are getting that question. So to solve this problem, I'll just come here. But by default, after setting all this code is going to this next line and still executing this line of code that is responsible to output the next question. So what I'm going to do is to say, if this is matched after all doing all this, I will return. I'll just return so that I get out of this block line. I mean this block of code, right? Instead of going to the next, after hitting this line, I just get out of this block of code. And that should solve that problem. So I go back, I refresh. Welcome to the quiz. Let's start the quiz. Let's have replied. I've replied. So when I hit this, you see quiz done. And I go 0 out of 5. So let me try to do better and start again. What is a snake? Animal. I get 1 point. Next. What is Python? Programming language. Right answer. So here you can no longer click to any other answer. So continue. What is JavaScript programming language? Continue. Where do you get your tutorials from? Yeah. Here I just said Skillshare. So next, that's the right answer. Next, I say how much money do you spend daily? And as I said, I was just lying to you, but this is what I choose as the right answer. So now I have my 5 out of 5. So here, if I try to click next, yeah, it says quiz done and I got 5 out of 5. So guys, this was all for this quiz app. Hope you enjoyed this video, and once again, this application is fully responsive. You can host it and send it to your friend, to all the members, to tell them to try it. So guys, thanks again for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.